Well, here we are at our latest Leaders in Housing Counseling call. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We did get the message that the slides that we sent out for the MPACT presentation did not transfer well, and Shane from MPACT sent us a new set that's on a PDF, and Matthew just got that out, so that should be available to you. Thank you, everybody who notified me, and thanks especially to all those people who notified me without notifying the entire list, so that we didn't pummel people as much as we do sometimes. But a lot of people were very responsive. We thank you for that. Cool. So let's get started. We're going to do our updates on the latest on federal funding. We had our meeting with FHA Commissioner Brian Montgomery, and we got a great panel of people who participated, so that should be good. And we're going to do the second half of the call around one of the newest client management systems, MPACT Pro. It's part of the eHome America suite of programs. And then, of course, we'll do a quick plug on joining NHRC. So with that quick note, let's move on. And Matthew, federal funding update.
Yep, thanks, Bruce. So a couple things to mention to folks. Kind of the big news is that the Senate this week is supposed to vote on a package of what they're doing, what they're calling minibuses, which are packages of 2 or 3 or 4 of the 12 appropriations bills at a time. So this week, they are supposed to today vote on a package of bills that includes the THUD bill. There was actually some talk yesterday and this morning that they may not end up voting on it today. They may punt until Monday because there are a large number of amendments. So when you're dealing with 4 different appropriations bills, there's that many more potential amendments. The manager's package is pretty significant, so it looks like it may happen today, but it may not happen until Monday. But it looks like that bill will pass through the Senate. So THUD will have passed the Senate. The significance there is folks will remember that the Senate version of the THUD bill cut funding for housing counseling assistance from $55 million to $45 million. That was the same as what happened for FY 2018, and they did end up restoring funding in the conference committee when the House and the Senate get together to reconcile their different bills. We're optimistic that we could have that happen again this year, but we're obviously trying to not even have to get to that point. So we're trying to work with some senators to try to get funding restored in the manager's amendment. That's the amendment that essentially it's amendment that makes all the changes and is certain to pass versus amendments that are often offered on the floor. If they're changing spending amounts, it's extremely difficult to get those passed. So we are trying to get that included in the manager's amendment. It is a kind of a heavy lift at this point. And if it doesn't happen, obviously, then we would go to trying to get it done in conference. It is also worth noting that THUD, which has traditionally been a non-controversial spending bill or fairly non-controversial spending bill, has become somewhat controversial because the Freedom Caucus on the House side has issues with spending on HUD. So the House will still need to pass a version of THUD in order to get to the conference committee, and that seems to be going much more slowly. It is the opposite of how it has traditionally gone, where the Senate is usually the chamber that's lagging. This time the Senate's moving relatively quickly, and the House is lagging. But that's the short of it. Is there will be a vote, if not today, then likely on Monday on THUD. We will have a housing counseling number on the Senate side. It's likely going to look like 45 million. We are doing our best to try to get it restored to 55, but then we'll have the conference committee again to try to get that number back up. So I will hand it back to you, Bruce. If you have any questions or want to highlight anything else?
No, I think that's it. Sounds good. And as always, thanks for being on top of it. We're following this closely, and it's important to all of us. Good. So we had a great meeting with Brian Montgomery, the FHA commissioner. and was, I think, significant because many of you helped with the work to get him through the Senate confirmation process when it was stuck, and we were pleased that they quickly scheduled a meeting with us, and we ended up flying in 10 of the stronger voices in our community to represent our broader community on issues that involve HUD and FHA. He's our critical person, and as many of you know, we worked with him back during the second George Bush era when he was FHA commissioner then, and has some deep understanding of housing counseling. So let's start off just, Simone, can you, so we have Simone Griffin from Home Free USA, wanted to just get your sense of the meeting and how it fit in and the significance of it.
Yeah, first of all, I think the meeting was great. It's rare that we're in these meetings, and sometimes I feel like we're kind of talking at them or they're talking at us, but this was really an engaging dialogue between Brian and us. And in addition to the 4 organizations represented on this call, we also had Unidos US, HPF, and Urban League, National Urban League on there, and NeighborWorks America. They were, in addition to, as I said, in addition to the 4 that were on the call. Was there anybody else there, Bruce?
The National Housing Resource Center dropped by.
Well, yeah, as I said, in addition to the people that are on this call, the National Housing Resource Center did drop by. Right. So, but again, it was a really good dialogue. We actually we thought we had an hour and a half. We planned for an hour and a half. Brian kind of walking in the room said, okay, you got an hour. But then he ended up staying for an hour and a half. And again, he was fully engaged. And he even said this was one of the best meetings that he had been to. So you can tell, Brian is really committed to HUD and the work that HUD is doing, and he is looking at new and innovative ways to come in and change a couple things. So he really talked to us from the position of how can we partner and how can we connect. One of the things that we did, Gene Spencer with HCF came up with a great idea. We ended up asking Brian, how can we best help you guys? And one of the things that he really talked about is how we can help with disaster recovery. And I'll be honest, I'm not really involved with disaster recovery, but it's not something that I know I had immediately thought about. But once he said it, and I'm going to kick this over to Jennifer, who can really give more, it made a lot of sense. And there are a lot of different things that we can do to support disaster recovery efforts, throughout the country. So I'm actually going to turn it over at this point to Jennifer to talk a little bit more about that.
So we don't have Jennifer on the line at the moment. So we, if we get her, we'll certainly plug her in. She did present at the meeting, and it was really a back and forth dialogue. I mean, I think a few things that jumped out at me about that part of the discussion. So that really, we took a good half hour of the meeting for that, and there were a number of high points that came out, and if Jennifer joins us, I'm sure she'll have her own thoughts as well. She was really the leader in the conversation, but that housing counseling needs to be. Oh, hey, Jennifer.
I've been on. I was muted.
You were muted. Okay, well, thank you. Glad to. So let's flip it over to Jennifer.
Okay. So yes, I just want to correct one thing that Simone said. He didn't say it was one of the best meetings he's had. He said it was the best meeting that he had. So.
You're absolutely right. I was being modest, but he did say it was the best. You're right.
31 days in office.
Right. So, yay us, right? So the background of going in was we had decided that we would put disaster relief pretty low down on our agenda. But when we arrived, the first thing that he brought up, that Brian Montgomery brought up to us, was disaster recovery. And I think that this is something that HUD is struggling with, and obviously is in the forefront of their mind. And one of the things that we had discussed before the meeting was that sometimes it feels that HUD doesn't treat us as their partner. They fund us, they regulate us, but it always feels like we could be working closer with HUD, especially in the FHA world. And I'm sorry, it's this time of day my mailman comes and the dog hates him. So the conversation really quickly turned to, I think that when we think of disaster relief, we were thinking of taking care of people's basic necessities right away. That's the immediate concern, and that may not be a place for housing counseling, but the long-term recovery of disaster relief is a great place for housing counseling, because anybody who's worked in disaster recovery knows that there's an alphabet soup of agencies involved. There's FEMA, there's the Small Business Association, there's HUD, there's your local, there's local relief, there's the Red Cross, Salvation Army. There's so many people involved, and it often feels like they're not working together. And if you've ever been through a disaster personally, you know that there's a lot of passing the buck that goes on amongst them too. So we brought forth that if we could be integrated into the process, that we could act really like we do in the mortgage process, as a liaison to all of these different processes, as a wealth of knowledge as to what resources are available for each individual homeowner, and we'd be able to actually talk to homeowners about their individual needs and make sure that if they needed a loan from SBA, that they could apply for it. If they were eligible for FEMA, if they were having trouble negotiating with their insurance company. These are all things that a housing counseling agency can do. And a lot of the work is very similar to foreclosure prevention. So he was very intrigued by this idea and felt that, Brian Montgomery felt that he could start by connecting us with the FEMA administrator, and that we would have a get together to figure out how we could bring housing counseling into the process. And again, those that have done this kind of work, it often feels like we reinvent the wheel every time there's a disaster. And one thing that we are certain of is there's going to be another storm, there's going to be another fire, there's going to be another flood. It's always going to happen. And we should be better prepared. We should have a way of starting fresh, not having to reach back to whoever was responding to the last disaster. We should already have a plan in place, and we should already be working with our local community to know what we're going to do when that happens. So we left off with a task of putting together the top 10 things that we thought the FEMA administrator would need to know about housing counseling, and the top 10 things that homeowners should know about disaster preparedness. Which probably we should modify to be top 10 things that homeowners should know that housing counseling can do for disaster preparedness, because I don't think having batteries in your radio is something that we need to explain to them. But I think that was a great thing. And then also going forward, we discussed the possibility of actually having a new funding mechanism to pay for this type of work, so that maybe organizations could become disaster recovery designated organizations and be able to apply for funding, so that when there is a disaster, you're not doing the work without the money up front. So I think that covers everything. Please feel free to put some
I think
stuff
one
in
thing
the
that he
minutes
also
about.
mentioned is the idea of so one concept that Jennifer already touched on is this idea that housing counselors are prepared now for the disaster, rather than having to learn how to do this while they are in the middle of the disaster, and maybe also having had their own houses impacted. But one fresh idea that he had was to get housing counseling representation in the disaster preparedness committees. And this is the kind of fundamental web of support and protection that every local government has. These are really impressive organizations, and the idea that we would be in that most baseline trigger area is that when something happens, you're part of the communication loop, and you're part of the decision-making process. I think in the meeting, Jennifer made the point that we're not first responders, but we in fact are right after that. And that point of contact that I know when I was doing lots of work with around Hurricane Katrina, we were in the disaster relief centers. We were the only ones who weren't talking about the immediate disaster and helping. And suddenly there was one place people could go if they were homeowners about what to do. And we were literally a breath of fresh air for people. So anyways, this was very exciting. You know, he was deeply invested in it, and we know he's already asked internally at HUD to investigate this more. Thanks. So then the next area was around delinquencies, and Linda from Beyond Housing, Linda Ingram.
Hi, everybody. So I'll just jump right in and say that actually anyone who's ever done delinquency counseling knows that you're working with a disaster. So it's the temperament that one needs to do that would fit in great with the disaster preparedness that Brian was talking about. My role at the meeting was to talk about a story. I'm kind of the storyteller because I do the delinquency counseling every day, and I've done it for, over 10 years. So I basically just used the story of one of my clients who has an FHA loan and had been unemployed and then got a job. And so from my perspective, this should have been a slam dunk to get her back after a 4-month delinquency. As it turned out, and often does, unfortunately, it was not a slam dunk working with this particular servicer, and I had to call into action the HUD Servicing Center. So I made the point to Brian that the HUD Servicing Center and the representatives there who help us are extremely important in the work that we do. And, I wanted to make sure that that he understood that we really need them and that it needs to be staffed and we need to have access to them. And what was interesting, and I found it in other meetings, that he immediately started talking about a friend or a relative who came to him because they knew that he was affiliated with HUD and they needed help with their mortgage. So he really gets what we do. And I think as the servicing rules seem to be diluted in a sense, even though there are fewer foreclosures than in the heyday of foreclosures, there are still foreclosures and there are fewer housing counselors who are working on them. So I found him to be very refreshing and very relatable, because in our discussion, he talked about the mission. And, I think that's something that we are not hearing a lot from our political leaders, is that there is a mission. And, everyone in that room for this meeting understands what that means. And I said something to Brian after the meeting about how much I appreciated that. So I think that shows that he really, really gets it. So.
That sounds good. Thank you.
I think that's it.
That's it. Great. Excellent. Then we had pre-purchase, and he was clearly supportive around pre-purchase counseling. We took an interesting twist, which was that he was highly focused on down payment assistance programs that he said were dangerous for consumers, and kind of took me aback. We see DPA programs, down payment assistance programs, as highly valuable in our work. And I've learned a little bit since then. There are some down payment assistance programs that are government sanctioned not necessarily by the State Housing Finance Agency, but by more localized institutions. So the example that I've heard about is in California. Some local county organizations have created these down payment assistance programs, and they're actually not assistance. They are simply raising the interest rate on the mortgage to fund the portion of the down payment. And that in and of itself not a bad thing, right? I mean, it helps people get into houses who have less cash. Very important in markets that are especially higher priced. But where it kind of has a weird twist is that in the pricing, that the interest rate is substantially higher, so 6-7% rate rather than the typical half-point bump up or whatever that are used. And FHA works with governments, so they work with these programs, but they are apparently these programs, some of them have pretty high foreclosure rates and default rates. And so this is sort of a red flag. It's I think Alot Diaz from Unidos US pointed out that DPA programs are deeply important to our constituency, and he acknowledged and agreed about that. And we did have a discussion about how having a housing counselor involved could help people figure out what the right thing is to do. But it is interesting. And so if you're familiar with programs like this anywhere in the United States, where there's an unusually high bump up in the interest rate, in the premium pricing in order to get a down payment assistance, he found some that on the internet that said, no down payment, and made it sound like free money. And in fact, of course, you're certainly paying for it. So something we should understand about. It's in the context of this, but I think in general, pre-purchase will be an area that we'll make some concrete proposals on, and they'll be interested in figuring out how we can work together. So with that note, the other interesting, really fascinating discussion where he was deeply knowledgeable was on HECM. So Ellie, do you want to help us with that?
Sure. Excuse me, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so we dove right into talking about reverse mortgages and the impact that some of the foreclosures are having on our constituents and and our customers. And I think that most of the people on this call are probably aware that FHA is taking big losses on reverse mortgage, and it's really causing problems with the mortgage insurance program. So they're really concerned about this. And one of the things that he talked about was that he felt one of the biggest cause for these big losses was that the appraisals are too high on properties. We also talked about the property tax issues. He mentioned that he didn't have any data, but he thought that it was clear that there'd been a drop in foreclosures related to taxes since the new rules came out. We also did talk about the need to really figure out how to get homeowners in with housing counselors really early when they start to have a problem with their reverse mortgage. So, on the one level, at the very least, getting a letter out to say, hey, we see that you're having some trouble. You might be able to benefit from accessing the services of a housing counselor, and here are some agencies in your area. But we also talked to them about the possibility of trying to figure out how to really do a more proactive, warm handoff to a housing counseling agency, for the lender to actually be able to potentially reach out to a housing counseling agency to say, hey, we have this homeowner that is having a problem. So we did have a conversation about that. He completely understood that. Another thing that I just want to double down on something that Linda said is that I was a little late for the meeting because of American Airlines, but I think I heard in my time there twice that he really strongly mentioned how important he sees housing counseling and how important he sees the historical mission of HUD, and that he is strongly supportive of that. And that he also understands the importance of funding for the services that he hopes housing counseling can provide to FHA homeowners and home buyers. So those were the big takeaways. We did talk a little bit about data. He's very interested in data, and he mentioned it a few times. So we did talk about the importance of some of the study that HUD is embarked upon right now for housing counseling and the benefits of housing counseling, and in the hope that he would be able to help support that. Those are my big takeaways.
Excellent. No, this is great. And on the funding question, so at the end, we made a couple plugs around money. He said during the meeting a couple of places on his own. We understand that you need to be paid for the services you provide. Not that he had opened up a checkbook, but just that this is a concept that he was comfortable to try to figure out. And so the two ideas that we came in with, one was the idea of when HUD proposes to OMB what the president's budget will be on each line item. And we have been down in the basement at $45 million last year, and then we have to go into Congress and try to build up from there. And so what we were pitching is, start with 65 million and make that the proposal. And the second one was that disaster relief would also be a thing to be funded. But I was a little worried with the idea that if we said disaster relief, they would take the existing funding and then say, we'll devote 20% to disaster relief without providing new funding. So the suggestion was to do a separate line item around disaster relief. And and his response, I mean, you have to appreciate he was completely candid with us. And he said that it would be a tough sell to increase the proposed amount for housing counseling. But he said that it was an interesting idea about a separate line item for disaster relief, that there's a lot of recognition about the need. And we understand that there may be some legal barriers that are now coming up in this process, but we know that HUD is looking at this question seriously enough. And we will we'll kind of keep you informed as we learn more. And I think in terms of organizations, it's worth really thinking about having your staff take the available trainings on disaster relief, even if a disaster has not happened in your area. There are a couple ideas here. One is disaster happens everywhere in some form, and it doesn't mean you will always get the FEMA and congressional allocations we would like, but given the climate change, weather craziness, we're seeing things all over the place. So we're thinking about it that way. And Jennifer had an interesting idea in the disaster relief conversation, which was that when things happen and you need a kind of a very quick, immediate response, can counselors from neighboring states come in and do some of the initial counseling work? And could there be money available for that? And I had some experience, we didn't have federal funding for it, but we had some experience doing that in Katrina, and it was very powerful and very helpful. One of the things that we saw was that the New Orleans counselors were just not able to do as much as they would, because they were dealing with their own disaster issues. And so having people who had a stable housing situation from another location coming in. So, I mean, it was that kind of conversation with Brian Montgomery. It was free-flowing. It was candid. It was, I think, helpful in many ways. I don't know if anybody else has anything else they want to throw in quickly before we close this up.
This is Ellie, and the only other thing I want to throw in there so Simone and Jennifer talked about how he said this was the best meeting that he's had yet. The other thing he said, you know, many times when we have these meetings with different officials, we're at an hour and bam, we're out the door. And he just was not like that at all. In fact, he said he had another meeting at 3:00 that he put off so that he could meet with us for longer. So I was just really impressed by that. I think he really gets it, and I think he's supportive, and I'm heartened about going forward with him.
And he took the time to take a photograph with us. That was good. So, and it's a nice picture. So on next steps, so we're going to put together several page memo in each of these categories of practical things we're suggesting FHA can do. So if you've got some practical thoughts, please shoot them our way. We are going to get this all together in August with the idea that we'll try to get a follow-up meeting in the fall. And, you know, we hope that this will be a second working session, that this will be good. Ruth Roman and Sarah Jarik were in the meeting, and then many of their staff members were on the phone as well. And the early reviews we've heard has been that HUD views the meeting as very positive as well. So good work on everybody involved, and thanks to the committee that actually did the meeting. They worked pretty hard at it and really represented all of us well.
Bruce, we have a question / comment on down payment assistance. I don't know if...
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Let's do it.
All right. It's long, so I'm just going to read it. So this is someone who works for Neighborhood Housing Services of South Florida, is as the director of homeownership of the Homeownership Center for Miami and Broward. Her issue with down payment assistance and CC programs is the length of time it takes for borrowers to be approved. After the lender approves the borrower for a loan, the case file is submitted to the government agency responsible. It takes those agencies 2 to 6 months to approve the borrower. The timeline creates problems. Sorry, the length of it is making it a little tricky. Cash buyers and those buying with a straight loan can close in 30 to 60 days, but not low-income borrowers. What would you suggest? How can we make the timeline shorter for low and moderate-income clients?
So, I mean, it's interesting because some local governments are able to push the checks out quicker than others. And last spring, we had Ralphine Caldwell with the Mecklenburg Charlotte Housing Partnership. They actually are HUD approved housing counseling agency that runs the down payment assistance program for Charlotte. And thinking about models like that, this really is this problem of this is a highly localized issue that local governments have to either devote the resources to or subcontract with people who can. But there's no question that, delaying in today's market, if you can get a property, delaying the purchase by all these snags are really putting our people at a disadvantage. Certainly if anybody has familiarity with the problematic version of the down payment assistance with that's paid out of an interest rate premium where it's a unfairly high rate. I would love to hear about it. This is relatively new to me, and this is an area that HUD and their IG, the Inspector General, have gotten into some heated debates about, and this may show up in our future. And knowing more about it would be great.
And this, I'm not completely following this, but I think it should make sense to folks. I think, and it's in response to the question about down payment assistance programs. So someone from NHS of San Antonio says they have a second lien at a rate of 0.5 point above the first lien rate, amortized over 20 years. It is our money and should be able to assist with FHA.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the good product. That's the stuff we like. I think that's a good example of where it's working appropriately. Good. Okay. Thanks. So thank you, team. Thank you for had a good meeting and good discussion just now. Let's move on to our featured presentation, Impact Pro. We've got Shane with us, and Impact Pro is a part of the eHome America program. Is that right, Shane? And give us the background and tell us how it works.
Okay, no problem. Thank you guys for having me on the call. And so, yes, Impact Pro is an approved client management system as of October of last year by HUD. So prior to getting it approved, we went through beta testing with over 15 different agencies with respect to getting from them what they needed to be able to accomplish the very good work that they do in their community. So this kind of dovetails into the discussion that we had on the last leader call, where we talked about the future needs of the HUD counseling world with respect to technology and where things are going, or where things will be going if they're not already there with a lot of the agencies. So again, with respect to that, Impact Pro is, I guess, the brother or the complementary access tool, client management system to eHome America, and could be the solution for a lot of the housing counseling agencies that are out there and do the work that they do on a regular basis. So wanted to just make sure that we are matching the needs, the expressed needs of agencies that are out there where they are looking for other client management solutions. And going back to the previous leader call, we talked about, there are a number of excellent client management systems out there. We believe that this could be the solution for a lot of the agencies because of some of the features that I'm going to briefly touch on, and of course walk through the system itself. So if you don't mind, advance to the next slide. So everyone knows, we've stated this a couple of times, that it is a client management system that has been approved, highly customizable, some of the things that I'm going to touch on here shortly, but it does allow for the efficient transfer of information. It does eliminate a lot of the dual entry that agencies and counselors have to deal with. So it does save time and does make your work a lot easier to be able to be accomplished and to be able to report out on those outcomes of the work that we do. Next slide. And as we get into the system, we're talking about a system that is fully integratable to a lot of the other programs and systems and other reporting tools that are out there today. So it is a system that can talk to other systems. It is easily accessible. By that we mean it is, anywhere you have internet access, you can access the system. So the only challenge that we would have to that is if for some reason the internet goes down, and sometimes we do run into that. But even in those cases, the system information that is put into the system is never lost. So you can still retrieve the information in a number of ways. We have the audit feature, or the self-audit feature, that actually tells you or tracks what you're doing, and if you are putting information in the system incorrectly, it will not allow you to go on to the next step. So that being said, it is user-friendly, an easy to follow intake system, or you can design a different method or methods of intake, which I'm going to talk about here briefly, but it does address all of the services that you do report to and through to HUD. But in addition to that, if there are other services that you have that are a particular private funder, whether it be a state organization or a bank that is providing you funds, you can set up a system where you can report out in the manner that they so wish, in order to make sure that you are providing the impacts that they came to you for. Next slide. And as we go into the system, and this is just a snapshot of one of the screens, the resources and reporting screen, where we are highlighting the increased productivity. By that, we mean that you can customize the tiles to be able to access the things that you do on a regular basis. Everything ranging from eHome America to being able to do your standard reporting and other tools that we have in the system that enhance or make your job easier to do. And you have the ability to be able to customized tiles for work that you do in your individual agency, and there are also resources that we add that everyone has access to. In addition to that, there's an activity page that shows you all of the activity or registers all of the activity that you as an agency does, so you can always see what is going on at a glance with respect to the history and or counselor activities for an agency. Next slide. So with that, we're talking about increased efficiency and measurable results. So if I can hit you to go ahead and hit that, click that 3 times so I can talk about this piece with respect to intake. What we found is a lot of agencies are going more and more towards wanting to have the ability for the client themselves to be able to enter or capture a lot of their own intake data. So we have the ability to be able to have the client self-direct their intake up to a great extent with respect to the items that they are aware of. So we can create, or there already is a web form that could be emailed to the client, post it on your social media if you're so inclined, and or embedded into your agency's website to be able to have the client complete a lot or a large portion of their own intake. They can also register for their own classes, and you can follow up and track that information. If the client enters this information through the web form, it will automatically populate on your system to be able to show that that client has done so, and you can take the necessary steps for them to be able to go through the actual intake process and receive services. With respect to the client coming over through another portal, in this example, eHome America, if I can get you to go ahead and select that, please. Once the client completes the educational component for eHome America, that information, their demographic information, all of their educational history that they've completed through eHome would automatically populate within Impact Pro, and then by the clicking of a button, you could go ahead and complete the intake. So you would not have to go through the process of completing intake a second time. So there would be no dual entry for those clients that come to you through eHome America if you are an agency that is utilizing eHome America. And third, last but not least, the standard way of completing intake where the counselor can enter the majority of the information. And just so that everyone knows, you would have the ability to be able to make a phone call from within the system, to do a video chat to be able to conduct the counseling session, and then the standard way of doing the counseling that is face-to-face. So you have the ability to be able to provide counseling in all of the modes that's acceptable by HUD, and in some ways that are preferred by the client based on logistics or geography and things like that. So we're here to be able to show you there's a more efficient way to manage data, manage your clients, and to be able to optimize those relationships that can come about as a result of using a client management system that allows you to do that. Next slide. So with respect to client services, you can manage your outcomes, impacts, and increase or design a new workflow by utilizing the fully customizable tiles and or apps from within the system. You can schedule tasks, you can integrate your calendars, you can connect with other users of Impact Pro and or lenders and referrals by sharing documentation, assuming that you've had the client sign off on the proper disclosures, securely from within the system. So versus sending documentation via email, which may or may not be secure depending on how you are set up in your agency, but you wouldn't have to worry about that with Impact Pro. It's done from within the system, and you can control the level of access in terms of the documents that you share with the individuals in the system. We have the ability to be able to have you send a text as a reminder to the client, to send forms electronically so they can be signed and retrieved securely from within the system, and an email reminder to be able to help, again, remind that client that, you know, they need to bring in certain documentation, or to notify them of an update that may be going on with their case. And of course, you have the ability to be able to store electronically all documentation from within the system. So you have unlimited access to file storage that you control with respect to sign-on privileges, signing in and or out to be able to access certain documentation. But the client file information would be attached to the actual case itself from within the system. In addition to that, you also have the share file account that gives you unlimited access to additional storage for other items and documents that you may store as part of your system. Next slide. With respect to customized reporting, you can customize a report on any data that is entered into the system. So in this case, you can do it based on any number of criteria created by, created on, the last date that someone touched it, however you tag that information, the client profile. So there is no limit to the amount of customized reporting that you can do from within the system. One challenge that, well, not challenge that we've overcome, the agencies that we do have on board right now have, in some cases, been intimidated by what they can customize, but we've come in and shown them that you use the tool in the manner that you want in order to be able to capture the impacts and scopes that you need to be able to report out on. And so once those reports are built, and if you built them correctly, meaning that you captured the data that you want, you can review that information at a glance, because you can save that report as a favorite on your home page. And even if you wanted to, you can review those reports on your smart device. So this allows you access at any time to be able to get the information that you need and be able to provide updates to whomever needs that information. Next slide. With respect to the reports that we're used to from a standard standpoint, that we have the ability to be able to have you submit a HUD report both electronically and the standard way of going through HCS to be able to manually enter that information. But you can also download that report in an Excel format, which allows you to be able to set up aggregated reporting. So if you do submit your report through your intermediary, this gives them the ability to be able to pull that information and merge it in without them having to go through extra steps. We can also set up the aggregated reporting for the intermediary to make it a little bit easier. And then when it is time to be able to report this information out, they would click on that saved report through the standard features and then just submit it forward or make corrections, or have the individual agency go back and make corrections and then resubmit that information. So this makes it a little bit easier or less frenetic when it comes to reporting time, which I think we're in that period right now where agencies are sweating bullets in terms of making sure that they are getting accurate reports out and up through the proper protocols. Next slide. With respect to eHome America, here's a snapshot of what that looks like. Once you're in the pre-purchase or the home purchase case, there's an icon that you can click on that actually houses all of your eHome America clients once they have completed that educational component. Upon completing that educational component, all you would have to do is go in and select that appropriate client. It would open up the eHome America case, and then you could proceed with creating or selecting the button to create the home purchase case, to continue on with the counseling and hopefully the positive resolution of creating another home purchase client. So as I mentioned earlier, no dual entry. With respect to this is a seamless integration process, and it's an easy system-to-system tracking to be able to identify issues or challenges that you have to overcome when it comes to that. Next slide. So with customer support, I, as the national administrator, am guaranteeing that with respect to customer support, you have the ability to be able to chat with the team at any time by clicking on an icon. You can see you can see the individual if you use the video option, but the support team would respond to you in real time, providing you dialogue on the development of new ideas or something that you think should be working a certain way. And it gives you the opportunity to be able to submit with suggestions to be able to make your life easier, because I have often said the best idea is a borrowed one. So we'd like to borrow the ideas from you to be able to make life easier with respect to being able to have a successful outcome for all of your clients and the communities that you serve. Next slide. With respect to the platform that we're built off of, we are built off of the Podio platform. And this is just an excerpt from PC Magazine that talks about the pros and cons of the system. No system is perfect, but with respect to Podio, it is platform agnostic, meaning that the Impact Pro client management system can sit on and talks to other platforms. So some of the other platforms that are out there that are also awesome platforms, Salesforce, we can talk to Salesforce, we can import and export information or data out of those systems, as well as the Microsoft Dynamics platform and other platforms that are similar that import or export a CSV or Excel document. The Podio platform and Impact Pro grows with you. So as your agency does grow, so does Impact Pro. So with a lot of agencies that are signing up, as a matter of fact, I'm at an agency today, and we are actually customizing some other additional services that they do outside of HUD, but are a part of their mission. And so we're showing them how they can be a little bit more successful and not duplicating the efforts or dual entry or just being smarter with the work that we do. So the Podio platform allows us to do that because of its versatility and nimbleness, if that's a word. But it's very easy to understand and makes your life a little bit easier as well from a counseling world. Next slide. With respect to customization, the ability to customize items from within the system is scary. I do say do so at your own risk. In a lot of cases, agencies have asked to do a customization, and my response has been, well, that ability already exists. Let me show you how. But what they're referring to in a lot of cases is making sure that they adapt their workflow or change their workflow in some cases, because what we do want to do is maximize our efficiency, and we can do that by sometimes utilizing the apps that we've already designed and implemented from within the system, but in some cases building your own apps that are just for you. So you have that ability to be able to do that, to make sure that you are maximizing all the opportunities that exist within the system. Next slide. And in terms of pricing, I'm sure that was one of the questions that would pop up. The system comes with, I'll talk about what we're offering. If you enter the pricing code or let us know the pricing code of NHRC26, we will waive the first year's annual license. We will take a 50% discount off of the onboarding fee, which covers all training and technical assistance. So in this case, you would never have to pay for additional training or technical assistance if that were required for an agency, but we would discount that by 50%. So you would pay $750 for that. We're waiving the annual license, but there's also a $39 per month per user fee for each user of the system. So the example that I'm using is history has shown us that the average agency has about 3 users. So if that's the case, they would pay $2,154 for the first year of the system. Next slide. And I think this is the last slide. We are always available. So if you would like a demo, you can go to the website, impactpro.org, to be able to sign up for a demo. You can go to the webinars page or look at the URL that we have set here. Click on that, select a date, and most of the webinar demos are going to be on Wednesdays around 1 p.m. Central Time every Wednesday. So you can select the appropriate date that works for you, or you could just send me an email saying, hey, Shane, I would like a demo of the system, or I have some questions about the system, and hopefully we'd be more than happy to do that and welcome you to the Impact Pro community. So if there are questions, or if we have time for questions, I am available for answers.
Great, thank you. We do have a few questions. You did cover the cost, which was the main question folks had, but we still also have some questions rolling in. So the first question, can a HUD intermediary use the product to collect, compile, and analyze data from subgrantees and report to HUD?
The short answer is yes. The detailed answer is we could set that up for that agency or that intermediary to do that. And that is the desired approach. We are in some talks with some intermediaries right now to be able to provide them with the proper solution. One solution for one intermediary may be different for another, but again, the answer to that is yes.
Great. What is the maximum storage size for documents? And then are all the documents held in a cloud? And if what is the total storage capacity?
So the documents are held in the cloud. Unlimited storage capacity. To get the exact amount, what the capacity is, I'd have to follow up on that, and I can send that information throughout to you. But it is unlimited storage capacity. But of course, there is some limit to that unlimited term. But we have not met that limit and are nowhere near that.
Okay. And is there for individual documents? Is there any max size?
No max size. The individual documents will be stored within the actual case itself. So we're talking about two separate destinations for the storage of documents. The agency themselves can store all of their agency documentation within ShareFile. And if it is case data, it would live with the actual case for the client.
Great. Just going back to that PC Magazine clip you had, one of the cons was no time tracking. Can you explain what that means?
Great. Right. So no time tracking that the system offers. However, we have apps that we have built to be able to track or better track how and where things are going. So the system did not come with that out of the box, but we have apps that some agencies are using to be able to track that information in time.
Okay. So that I think addresses a follow-up is how do counselors track their time, and you're saying basically that there's just things that need to be added on.
Well, and thank you for allowing me to elaborate. So in that particular case, that has already been built within the system. So what I'm referring to is apps to be able to track other features from within the system, which is what the PC Magazine was referring to. But the ability to be able to track time, counseling time, and case management time is already built into the system. And then a report or a customized report can also be added where that's automatically going to be tabulated for you on a running basis, meaning that it could be monthly, bi-weekly, or whatever the parameter is or limits that you have set up. So once it's set up, you would not have to redo it, but that it's already in the system. It already exists.
All right. Can you just go back over, please, the user fee? Someone asked whether it's for the individual or for the office.
Okay, let me try to give a better example. So an agency that wanted to sign up today would not pay an annual license. They would pay an onboarding fee of $750, and then for each user, they would pay $39 per month per user. So 3 users would pay $117 per month. $117 per month times 12, if I'm doing my math right, is $1,404. You would add the onboarding fee of $750, and I think that comes to $2,154. So that would be the total.
Great, thank you. Will the product also work for rental counseling clients?
Yes, it does.
Great. Someone says it's an awesome product. And then asked if they're able to transfer all client data from Counselor Max.
Great question. I'm sorry I omitted that. Yes, we have the ability to be able to do an automatic transfer of data from Counselor Max into the system. They would live in the master client profile, and from there you could retrieve the client to proceed with or add other services for those clients.
Great. Is there a cost for doing that?
Great question. That is included in the onboarding, so there's no additional cost for the migration of data from certain client management systems. We have the ability to be able to transfer data from HCO, but it's we provide the template. You do the custom report from HCO, provide that to us, and then we upload that into Impact Pro. No additional cost for that either.
Great. And there's a few more questions on pricing. So just to kind of come back to that. So first is the user fee paid annually or monthly, or how does that?
So flexible payment option. So quarterly is preferred, semi-annually would be the next option, and then annually. But if there are special circumstances, I, as the national administrator, can make that call. So we work with you in terms of if you wanted to set up a monthly billing option, if that's where that person was going with the question.
Great. And then just to clarify, so you broke down year one, which includes the $750 for the onboarding. Year two, then it would just be the $39 per user.
No. So the first year is what I've quoted. The second year, you would have an annual license that would be $1,500, and you would have the $39 per month per user. There's only the onboarding fee is a one-time onboarding fee, but there's an annual license thereafter, which we are waiving the first year.
Okay, got it. So it's okay. I think that answers that. Sorry, we just had a bunch of questions come in, but a lot of them are.
There are tools that we have in the resources and reporting page that I call value added, but could also help generate other unrestricted revenue depending on how they are utilized. Again, I'd urge you to request a demo, and we can talk about some of that or all of that depending on how much time the viewers have when it comes to requesting that demo.
Great. Just a couple more questions. I know we're a little over, but I think we can get through these pretty quickly. How do folks sign up if they're interested?
They can email me or they can go to the website, and I think most people will find that I respond in less than 24 hours in terms of what the next steps are. The process is you'd sign a user agreement, you'd receive an invoice, we'd schedule an onboarding date or a series of onboarding dates where we actually walk through how to use the system, show you what the video library is, which it will have a video of how to do and use everything from within the system.
Great. And for how long is the discount that you're offering today? How long would that be valid for?
If they are aware of the code in HRC 26, if they utilize that code, we're going to be flexible because we know the source and from which it came.
Great. Can client documents uploaded to Counselor Max be migrated as well as the data?
So yes, they can, but it's a little bit more of a process there, meaning that they would have to be downloaded from Counselor Max and then uploaded into Impact Pro.
All right. Will all homebuyer education clients be reflected on the 9902 even if they do not become a pre-purchase client?
Yes, because education is a service type that stands alone by itself. The choice to proceed with another service of home purchase or pre-purchase is the choice or the decision that the agency makes. But education is a standalone service that would show up on the 9902.
Great. Is the system compatible with loan origination software such as Calyx Point?
So we are in the process of finishing up the ability to be able to transmit or export a .fnm file, which is the language that the loan origination systems speak to. So before this year is up, we'll have that ability. We started working on that earlier this year. We paused to work on some other more relevant issues, and now we're picking that back up here this next week. So we had a 90% solution on that before we stopped. So we have about 10% to go in order to be able to provide that total solution.
All right. Last question. Does the system work with credit reporting services?
So credit reporting services is the other item that we were working on. We had to complete the questionnaire with Credco. So we will have the solution implemented from within the system as well before this year is up. Before this year is up with that, I like to give as direct an answer as possible.
Great. Thank you, Shane. I'm going to turn it back to Bruce.
Great. Thank you, Shane. Thank you, everybody. Just a quick note about becoming a member of NHRC. We've grown rapidly this year. Really appreciate everybody's support. And obviously, this is stuff doesn't happen without members stepping up. Not every housing counseling organization is a member yet. So the ones that aren't out there really could use your support right now. And big thanks to the many, many groups that have stepped up over the years, and now a whole cadre of groups that have joined this year especially. So keep up the good work. Thank you so much. We will be back in a first week of August, so very shortly, and it'll be the Grounded Solutions people. These are it's the people that are doing shared equity and land trust and things like that. I think we talk a lot about affordability and maintaining affordability and sustaining affordable home ownership. This is part of that policy discussion, so I think you'll find it intriguing, and we'll have that discussion on Thursday in a week. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon. Bye.